Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp with a Limp, and I'm here with one that I'm happy to be making, but I'm kind of sorry to be making as well. And I have to give my apologies to the publishers because it turns out they had sent this to me a while ago, and I completely forgot about it. They sent me a couple of games, and I covered one of them, but I didn't cover the other. I put it on my shelf, and it got covered, and I forgot about it. And it just slipped my mind. I had other games that came along that I had to cover instead. And I saw it and I was like, where'd that come from? Oh, crap. And I realized that I, put it aside and I was like, no. So I jumped on it real quick, got it on the table, and we're going to do a proper review on it. This is Crossing the Line, Aachen. Hope I'm saying that right. Aachen. 1944, and this is by Volca Simulations. And I gotta say, I'm actually kicking myself now that I've actually had some time with it, that I didn't get this out earlier and go over it, because it's really reminded me of some ones that are some true favorites of mine. This has a little bit of World at War 85 feel to it in the way that the formations activate, and that is something that I always really, really liked about World at War 85. Now, it's not the exact same by any means. It's its own system, but it is similar in that it is not that I go, you go system. Really, really, really like it. Let's go ahead and go to the table, let you guys see how the game plays, all that good stuff, and we'll come back for some final thoughts. Alright, so here we are down at the table. I've got the camera pulled up high so I can show you guys the majority of the map. We're going to start by going over the components of the game, and then we'll zoom down in and start getting into the nitty-gritty of how the game's going to be played. When it comes to the map itself, I gotta say I like this one. I think it's nice and functional. It covers the majority of the area where this battle was taking place, and you can see the namesake of the battle, the town Aachen, or should I say more like city over here of Aachen. This is one of the main victory point hexes that you'll start to go for, but there are a couple more spread across the map. And some of these smaller zones are little towns. We've got our little roads running through. And I especially like this. If you look here, running along pretty much majority of the map is their wall, right? Their defensive line. And it is impressive. And it is something that the Allied player is going to have to deal with, because there are dragon's teeth lining almost this entire thing. If you look, it starts down here, and it's not just the dragon's teeth. There are pillboxes and a lot of these hexes as well. So it's starting to add in defensively for the units that are located here, where they have dragon's teeth, they have pillboxes, they have forests, or maybe they're in town. All that stuff starts to add together, really give them some high defensive modifiers. You guys see that when we start getting into the combat itself. But this whole line runs from the southwestern portion of the map all the way to the northeastern portion. So the Allies they're not going to be able to scoot around it. They're going to have to find a place, bust a hole, and push through if they want to achieve their objectives over here. And just to zoom down, bottom right side of the map over here, you see this is where the Ruhr River is located. That was one of the objectives that the Allies had. They wanted to push past this river and hopefully push on further and cross the Rhine. As we know, historically that did not happen. Operation Market Garden ultimately was a failure, and the Allies did end up getting pushed back a little bit later on. But ultimately Germany lost, so now we get to, fight it out here. All right, so we've zoomed down a little bit so I can let you guys see a closer look at the map, some of these hexes, some of the detail that's in it, things like the light woods or heavy woods, city locations. The smaller ones, like this over here, that's considered a town versus this being like a city. There's a nice terrain effects chart I'll show you here in just a sec. And obviously, this is where the Allies are starting their advance from, and pushing in and probably having to try to find a little hole in this forest here so they can push past all of these defending German units. Now, when it comes to the counters themselves, I gotta say I like the counters. They are a little bit thinner than we see standard, but I don't know if you guys can hear this. You hear that? It almost sounds like a little tile. I like the little sound of these things. Pick one up so let you guys get a close-up view how thick the counters are. They all are pre-rounded, so you don't have to clip them or anything like that. I used to enjoy clipping, but I'm kind of past that point. I'm in my older years of wargaming now. I don't want to have to put in that much effort. Not many companies still use the die cut stuff, so that is appreciated. But they're nice, and for some reason they've got this little tile sound that I like. So the counters, good. But one of the issues with the counters is they're busy. They are very busy. There's a lot of information on these counters. All right, so we'll pick up this one that I was just showing you guys so you can get a close-up view of it. Up in the upper right, you're going to have the unit designation. This stripe across the top is the formation that it's part of. That's a very key thing. The symbol for that formation is the upper left. In the center, we have a symbol. This one is, what is this? Armored Engineers. All right, now we've got a set of numbers ringing this counter. For this type of counter, this left number is going to be its effectiveness rating. That is a key number. The best way to think about that in comparison to other war games you've played is its morale number. Okay, it's going to be used for a lot of different types of checks, especially post-combat checks or reaction checks, things like that. So think of that as like your morale number, but it is called your effectiveness check. Now across the bottom, these are relatively easy to understand if you played a war game or two. Bottom left is its strength, all right, so it's combat value. Bottom right is going to be its movement factor, right? So how far it can go, different types of movement. This one is armored engineer, so it's got kind of like a mechanized movement. Most infantry are not going to have that type. You see all these over here all have 2 movement. Cool thing for the infantry in this game, though, is if they do move without moving adjacent to an enemy unit, they get 2 extra points of movement. So they go from 2 to 4. And if you're moving along a road, you can really make some distance across this map with some infantry. Now, something different is down here in the center. All right, you see number 3 there. That is its anti-tank rating. Because tank values, tank, anti-tank, are going to be some key numbers that you're going to have to keep track of when it comes to combat, because it can give you some very big swings when it comes to the combat die roll modifiers. Look at a different example here. We have a armored unit, so you notice this one has a tank shown inside of it, or a tank destroyer, whatever you're going to have in there. If it's an armored fighting unit, it will have that in there. There are a few armored cars, Pumas, the like in here as well. Same type of information. It's formation stripe, it's number, it's unit formation symbol, effectiveness rating, it's combat strength, and movement value. And then this is its tank rating. Okay, so similar to the anti-tank rating, this is the tank rating. I'll explain that a little more when we get into combat, but understand you're going to be comparing some of those numbers, either tank or anti-tank, just depending on what units are involved in the battle and what type of attack you got going. So if you're attacking or if you're defending, just depends. We'll get into the specifics. All right, so that's a couple of different types of units. You're going to have different infantry type units. They'll either be leg or motorized. Then you have tank units, and then you have HQs. All right, let's focus in. This is an HQ counter, and this has, it looks like the same information, but this is not the same information. This is very much different going across the bottom here. All right, now starting with numbers, so 6, 10, 4, 3, all right? The 6 is not its effectiveness rating, right? So you do effectiveness checks with these units. For a HQ unit, like one of these, that's its reaction value, all right? So if you are trying to react to something an opponent is doing, it's going to be movement if they move adjacent to you, and you want to react to that. You want to stop their movement. You want to attack them back, so whatever's going on, you have to do a check, and that's the number you're going to be looking at for it. This bottom left number, that's its command range. So you see this one is located here, bottom right of the screen. it controls units up to 10 hexes away from it. Okay? As long as the unit is within that range and can trace a line to it. All right? So think of it this way. You're within the range, and then you can trace any number of hexes over to your command unit. You're still going to be in command. There's a lot of different variations with this. When it comes to being out of supply is mainly going to apply to your command, your HQ unit. Okay, the units themselves we consider to be out of command, or if they get completely cut off, they'll be considered isolating, start taking attrition damage. But you're going to be checking your command to see if they are within supply, so not cut off. Same thing with zones of control, all that usual stuff. And that they are proper range to all their units, and that those units can trace their line of communication back to the command, the HQ unit. Bottom right number, you're thinking, okay, that's movement, it's blue because it's HQ. No. It's kind of its movement, but it's not really. This is its relocation points. All right, so this is how many points have to be spent to move an HQ unit. Now, when it comes to this game, your HQ units are always going to be on the board. They're not going to participate directly in combat. So if an enemy unit moves adjacent to them, then that HQ will start being displaced. But if you want to move that HQ unit, right? So like as the Americans are coming across, or the Germans are retreating back, whatever's going on, you're not going to keep your HQ in the same spot. You got to move it. But HQ don't just, dilly-dally up the road. They're not operating like these guys. They can only be in very specific hexes. So they can only be in another city, town, or industrial hex. Basically, they got to be in a hex that has buildings in it, and they have to spend those points to move. That's how many action points they'll spend. We'll get action points here in a minute. But they will spend those points to relocate to whatever hex they're going to within their command range. All right, so the hex they want to go to, they've got to be able to actually trace the path to it, be in supply, all that good stuff, and not surrounded, obviously, by enemies. So they will spend that many action points to relocate their HQ to that location. As long as it has town, city, industrial, as long as it's got some buildings in it, you can move your HQ over there. You're not going to pick up an HQ and just move it out in the middle of the field. That doesn't happen in this game. And your HQ is never going to directly participate in a battle. It will indirectly add die roll modifiers, either aggressively or defensively, just depending on what the HQ is. Certain conditions are going to apply. Obviously, they have to be in supply and whatnot. But the HQs operate very much differently than the units. The units are going to be in combat. The HQ is just keeping everything organized. Now, something cool about these HQ units, while we're talking about them specifically, go ahead and mention this, is, let's say, keep this in mind when we start talking about activations. Let's say we want to activate this formation, but they're out of supply. You can, as a one-time one-off, you can flip the HQ over. They're considered to have used their emergency supply. So basically, they're pulling in their resources, and they can activate as normally, but they get moved down the track more. It's not something you're going to want to do a lot, because the penalties can add up. It can start to exhaust that formation if you do it too much. But it is something that the HQs have available to them. All units have their backside as a disruption. So like this tank, for example, flip it over and you'll notice there is a little line across it. Same for all of them. It's got the little D there for disrupted, and that just indicates the fact that the unit is disrupted. When they take damage, you actually use different counters to apply that damage, and it is something that very much differentiates this game from other games. All right, so I zoomed into this one specific counter just to show you. All right, We'll get into this a little more when we start talking about combat here in just a minute, but just go ahead and show you, since I am talking about the units. This unit here, let's say it takes a hit. All right, combat happens, it takes a hit of damage. You're not going to take and flip it over like you normally would, right? Now, there are things that will cause a unit to become disrupted, but if it takes a step loss, you are going to use one of these type of counters. There's a whole bunch of them with different values in there. All right, you see this one's 5, 6, 7, 4, and then on the flip side it goes all the way 1, 2, 3, 0. And you are going to place this with the top pointing up to whatever number their strength's going to be. So if they took a step loss, they would go from a 6 to a 5. So you would place that counter underneath them to indicate what their strength is now. Now let's say they take 2 hits. Later on in combat, you would change this over to a 3 and mark it down. So you see, that is how these combat units are going to be shown to have taken damage. And obviously, ones that have a higher combat strength can take more damage. However, they are going to wear down over time and eventually be taken out if they end up taking that amount of strength points. You see something like this tank, you think, wow, it's great. Well, it's great and it's not great. This tank does a really good job of giving us tank points, but it's not really contributing a whole lot of combat value. So I think this is signifying the fact that this is probably a tank platoon relative to the size of the units that we've got going on with this. Regardless, there's not that many tanks, so they're not going to be able to take just buckets and buckets of step losses, right? They can take a couple before they're really just wiped out. But combat-wise, that tank value, that's 6. But combat-wise, that's 6. That tank value of 6 can give a huge, huge swing in combat. We see over here, we got a different one that applies a 10 modifier. Again, that's huge because that can end up being the modifier for armor support in a combat action. It's really interesting the way combat plays out here. So you see the tanks are not really going to be used for their combat strength alone. You really want them for that tank value that gives you just this huge dive roll modifier for combat. Alright, so I'll slow down for a sec. I got too excited. I was talking about combat and all the cool things going on with this. I need to finish talking about the components, and take that as a good thing, because this game actually really caught me by surprise. I was expecting just a straightforward I go, you go, combat results table, smashy, call it a day. But this, I gotta say, it's bringing some stuff to the table I was not expecting, and I am kicking myself in the butt for not pulling this out quicker. I hope they accept my apologies for missing this one. I'll claim brain injury pass and hope they forgive me. All right, now let's talk real quick about the rest of the components. Right, so we've talked about the map, talked about the units themselves. When it comes to the player aids, now there's 2 guys, 2 D10s. Seen D10, you've seen them all. That's it. Now, the rest of the player aids are freaking mounted. They're all mounted. I mean, how cool is that? God, I love it. All right. When it comes to our scenarios, there are 3 scenarios and a campaign that you can do in this game. I have this set up for the campaign. Okay? So if you were starting the campaign or scenario 2, this is the setup that you would see. 1 and 3 are different. But I love it. God, I love it when a publisher does this. Here are the units. Here are what they look like. Here's the exact text they're going to go in. Thank you, freaking God. I love this. It makes it so easy, especially when the game's brand new and you're just punching them right out of the sheet and throwing them down on the table. God, it's so easy. It's beautifully easy, and I love it. Setting up a campaign. There, right there. That's it. I'm done. Yay. God, I love that. It's so easy. They even have it, hey, here's the American forces. Here's the German forces. Here's our little activation stuff. Here's where your game markers go. Everything nice, set up, and simple. Love it. When it comes to these player aids, perfect. A1. And freaking mounted. That is lovely. Now let's pull this one first. The back side of these two, now you're going to need both of them, okay? These are for reinforcements and withdrawals. So units that come into the game over the different turns. We got turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, down over here. It tells you what units and what hex they go in. Some are independent units that can be attached, and who they're going to be attached to. All that good stuff, where the formation counter is going to go on the formation track. And then the back of the other sheet, you see it starts again, turn 4, and goes all the way up to 7, because there are 8 turns in this game. So yeah, when it comes to setup, they nailed it. It's easy, so easy to understand. And even if it's units that are withdrawing, they have a big withdrawal listed out on it, so you don't have to try to figure anything out. Like, oh, no, these are the ones leaving. These are the ones that are coming on the map. Yay, great, perfect. Setup, easy. They streamlined it. Perfect. Other player aids, we've got a couple. We got Operations Chart A and Operations Chart B, front and back. Here we've got our combat sequence, how that's going to run. We'll talk about that in a minute. We have our terrain effects chart, all the different types of terrain with a picture, color picture at that. Give them props. Hate it when they don't have a picture. Most war games are not dumb enough to make a game without a picture, but I have had a few where they just had like this list, but nothing there. And I'm like, some of these, like some stuff are rough. What's rough? Like, what are you talking about? You know, but I don't. And then for our terrain effects chart, how many movement points, how many extras it costs, if a unit will exert a zone of control in different types of terrain. As you see, infantry exerts a lot more than armored fighting vehicles do. Combat modifiers, things like defending, anti-tank, attacking tank points, and then combat die roll modifiers. Backside of this is going to give us our sequence of play, which is rather simplistic. It's admin phase and ops phase. You can go back and forth between the two. Admin phase technically goes first, but in the first turn of a scenario or campaign, you don't start with admin. You skip that and go straight to ops. So just depending, you'll start with ops, but after that, it's admin ops, admin ops. Here is our action point die roll. Keep this in mind when I talk about activating formations. This is where you're going to roll for those activations. Depending on where the unit is and what you roll on the die is going to determine how many action points that you're going to get when you activate that formation. So I'll show you in a sec, actually, because I got to have the other player aid out so you guys can understand what I'm talking about. Down here at the bottom, it tells us how many action points are costed for any of the different actions that you can take. By the way, red means reaction. You get less action points when you are reacting to the enemy than if you are activating a formation yourself. Movements 1, refits 1, hasty. So for when it comes to attack, we have 3 of them. We've got hasty attack, regular attack, prepared attack. Obviously speaking, prepared attack is going to be your best one, but it costs the most action points. You could, if you roll the max is 7 action points. You could do 7 hasty attacks or 2 prepared attacks. That's the type of swing that you're going to have in the bonuses, the die roll modifiers, all that good stuff that you get that goes with the prepared attack. However, regular attack kind of in the middle. Get some, but not all. Only costs 2 versus the 3. Yeah, what you would expect right there in the middle. HQ relocation. That's what I was talking about earlier about HQs not moving. It's going to cost 1, 2, 3 points to move it, just depending on what's listed down on your HQ counter. And you can do improved defense. There is a counter for that. If a unit wants to dig in, they can put down in a little improved defense. But pretty much anything is going to cause that thing to go up. If you move, if they move, if someone attacks you, so many things cause that thing to go away. And then down here at the bottom, it does list down all the little ditties for all the different units. Remember, I said the counters are busy, and you can see there's a lot of explanation going around. for these things. It's not overly difficult, but they're busy. It's just a fault for the game. Chart B. Chart B, you see here at the top is a lot of different ratios. You're going to get a combat ratio, right? Your strength versus their strength. Attacker strength versus defender strength. And then there's going to be a roll. A 1d10 roll, but you know it goes up to 20. That's because there's a huge amount of die roll modifiers that can come into this. That's what those tank points I was talking about really do. They get you some big swings if you can conduct your attack in the right way. But as you see, it's going to change depending on what type of terrain you're in, right? So if you're attacking a pillbox in a forest industrial, 1-to-1 attack is way over here on the left, right? If you were doing that attack on a clear, that'd be a 1-to-6. You see the huge swing. 1-to-1 is way over here, right? So the more defensible the terrain, the more amount of firepower you got to bring to it just to get yourself a little bit more over onto the right. And honestly, that's as it should be. You know, it's harder to attack than it is to defend. So you are going to need to bring more power to bear if you want to really be able to punch through. Now, something they included that I just love, it's just ease of play, right? They didn't have to include this little bookmark thing here. As you see, it's got pictures of all the terrain, list down all the terrain, and you can slide this across. So let's say we've got 1-to-1 in clear, right? I'll slide it over. There's 1-to-1 in clear, and now it lists down, you know, my roll, right? That way I don't have to try to look all the way over here and trace it, because that way it's very easy to mess up. Here, boom, you just look right there. It is perfect. Like I say, that's showing that they care, right? They don't have to include this little piece, but they do just to make the game that little bit easier to play. That shows care on their part, and it is appreciated. Down here, list all our different modifiers. We'll talk about those when we get into a little example of combat. And the backside pretty much has to do with recovery and interdiction, reorganization. Now, I don't want to get too long-winded trying to explain all of this because some of it is a little confusing if you haven't read the rule book. Understand it this way. The German units, when they're getting reinforcements, they're not as much getting reinforcements as they're kind of reorganizing what they've got on the board so they can cannibalize a unit and get that many points to fix up a different unit, right? So it's what are you chewing up and where can you put those points, all right? So this non-motorized infantry, bicycle infantry, machine guns, non-motorized engineers can all be used to repair non-motorized infantry. Just think about it that way. And list it all down over here. You know, ding, 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 ding. Victory points for different types of losses listed down over here. Interdiction has to do with kind of like air power being abstracted to a little bit. This can affect things like the recovery for the HQs, especially for the Germans. The Americans are pretty much always going to be using these numbers here. So it's just listed down. If it has an effectiveness rating of whatever, it gets that many points moved up. The Germans are going to depend on where they are on the interdiction level. The US has a lot easier time replacing their units. They get so many points for the different types per turn, just flat. That's what they get. This is something very, very neat. This is the victory points for the different types of plans. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's grab this out. The US player is going to have a little bowl that has 8 different counters in it. And these counters are going to vary between dummy and things like Aachen, a little town or city over here, or other victory cities spread across the map. Your victory hex, right? The main objective that you're going to go for is going to vary game to game. The Germans are not going to know what the US's main objective is. Now they do long story short, they have a small chance of finding out, but it's a rather small chance. So that kind of simulates the fact that they're little spy network trying to figure out what the Americans are up to. They might be able to figure it out. They might not. But the Americans are going to draw one of these counters each turn, and that is going to determine what their ultimate goal is. Depending on what their ultimate goal is, they're going to get different points for taking different areas of the map. If they get Plan Aachen, they get 12 points for taking Aachen. Boom, right there's Aachen. Yeah, oh, yeah, that's what they're going to go for. But if they get Ruhr River, which is all the way back there in the bottom right that I showed you guys, they get 12 points for getting to Ruhr River, but they only get 4 for Aachen. All right, so you see how that changes things up. And then there are different other cities there as well that they will get points just depending on what they have. I guess I really like that. That lends to replayability for this game in a tremendous way. In the fact that your objective is going to be variable. Now, yes, there are only a handful of actual objectives that you can go for, but with your opponent not knowing, it makes it to where you can make fake attacks. You kind of go towards Aachen, but then you are really trying to push around so you can flank them and go towards the Ruhr. It really just lends itself to that replayability for the war game. I've showed you a good chunk of the player aids. There is one other one that is left, and I'll explain this, that this is a player aid that can replace what is along the edge. So let me tilt my camera up just a little bit. You see running all along the edge here is this player aid, effectively, okay? It's for both sides. It's for the different formations, how many action points, German formations, American formations, your game turn track up here with all the different ops, admin, all the way to the end of turn 8 for a victory check, interdiction level, and the initiative die roll modifier. So if you don't want to use the ones that are on the board, you can use this player aid, but it just gives you a second place to keep track of all of this information. Some of the scenarios are small though. Some take place on just the right side. Some take just place on the left side. So if you wanted, you could just set this on the other half of the board if you're not playing on that side of the board. All right, so I mentioned previously, my little open, that this game reminds me of World at War 85. And it reminds me of that because of the way that the formations are activated. All right. What I have done very quickly is pulled all these counters off from the board where I had placed them, and I put them on this player aid to make it a little bit easier to have it in camera and show you guys what I mean. Now, what I am talking about is that the formations all have a counter that's associated with that HQ and all the units that are on the board and or attached to it. Like the 526 Volksgrenadier here, they do have 3 units of independence that are effectively attached to them, kind of holding the line with them, and they activate as well with the 526. So what you're going to do in the ops phase of a game is you're going to go back and forth activating different formations, and you're going to roll for initiative to see who's activating next. That's why we have this initiative die roll modifier. For the campaign purposes, and actually I think all the scenarios but one, it starts off with the Germans having a +2 because the Americans get to go first. So ignoring the fact that the Americans are going first, let's say we were rolling for our next activation. We'd roll a die, let's say red's for Americans, black is for the Germans. And we'd roll it, Germans did really well. Oh, and they both got 9. In this case, though, the Germans would win because the Germans have a +2 modifier applied to it. That's going to get flipped to now the Americans would have the advantage for the next activation since the Germans just went. So one side could potentially win time and time again until it gets to the point that +12 is very not likely you're going to keep winning, But that modifier is just going to keep going up as long as one side keeps winning. When you win the initiative, you can either give the initiative to the opponent, or you can activate one of your formations. This ops phase is going to go back and forth until both sides have passed, which is effectively going to end the turn. So if you have played World at War 85, think of this kind of like drawing the cards, right? Except you don't have to draw the cards. You get to pick what formation you're going to activate. But that formation is going to move down on this track. Once they hit 0, they can no longer activate. And if they have their HQ who's used their emergency ration, so the HQ's flipped over, like I've talked about previously, then if you try to activate that formation, then you automatically get moved all the way to 0. That's one of those last-ditch effort type of things. Now, remember when I was saying that the Americans will go up during each admin phase. So once both sides have passed, we're going into the next turn, their formations go up a set amount. For example, these two would go up 5 and this one would go up 2. Yeah, this one will go up 2. But let's say we use that one twice. I'm going to go back up to 2, but it has a max of 4, which means if you use it once, you can go up to 3. Use it once again, you can go up to 4. But you can never go higher than whatever the max is. It is listed down on these counters what their max is. But if you remember, I showed you this player aid part 1, talked about these action points. These action points, you're going to roll that 1d10, and up here is that formation level that I was talking about. So the higher your formation level, the more points you're going to have to spend. You see, you get down here to 1, you have a chance to get a lot of victory or action points, but it's not very good. You have to roll a 10. There's 4 ones on this, and then it gets less and less and less as you go on up. Down here at the right side at 7, you've got 4 chances to get a 7. So you want to keep your formation as high up on this as possible because you have the better chance of getting those action points. However, you need to spend the formations. You need to activate them to get them to do stuff. I think this does a good job of showing combat exhaustion. Basically, the more that you use something, the less you're going to be able to use it in the future. There's a chance you can use it a good chunk, but it's not a very good chance. Your troops are wearing down, your equipment's breaking down a little bit. You need to ease up on them if you keep pushing and pushing and pushing until eventually you get to the 0 and they're not able to activate. But let's just say for our purposes that the Germans won this activation and they wanted to activate their yellow guys, right? So you would move this down by 1, all right? One of the things you got to do first is make sure that you do a supply check for all the units in the formation and the HQ itself. I know the units are in supply now because they're set up for the start of the scenario. But then we would roll. All right, he was at a 3. So we would roll and look here. Roll for him. He gets a 4. 4 on this for a 3. Only gives him 3 action points to use. Then you move this down to 3. And you remember that chart that I showed you. It costs 3 action points to do 1 prepared attack. So they could move a few units, they could do a couple of hasty attacks, they could move 1 unit and then do a prepared attack. You have to choose wisely how you're going to spend those points. All right, in an effort to speed this up a little bit, because I'm getting a little long in the tooth on the video, I'm just grabbing a couple of units to slap down to show you guys as a combat example. Because, yeah, I'm getting long on this video and I don't want it to be over an hour. But let's say they're spending the points here and they're doing an attack, okay? The German yellow unit is attacking this, which division? They're one of the armored divisions for the Americans, regardless. Yeah, that's the 3rd Armored Division. All right, so Stug here. Is that a Stug? Looks like a Stug. Yeah, I think that's a Stug. Attacking a Sherman tank. All right, and for example's sake, let's say that this Sherman tank is in a clear hex, right? So no river, no crossing, no pillboxes or anything like that to worry about. Just clear hex being attacked by the Stug. The combat value is not going to be 2 versus 5. There's a chance things can swing. And this is the key component of combat when it comes to this game. Alright, so I throw them both down just in a clear hex. And this is when you are going to randomly draw one of these counters for each side. One for the attacker and one for the defender. Now this is new. This is not something I have seen done in other war games previously. So what effectively happens is they are going to draw a combat chit. One for each side. Only one. Doesn't matter how many units are in the stack or any supporting units, anything like that going on. Okay? And you are going to look for your effectiveness rating. For the Stuck, remember it's a 6. A little number to the side. For our Sherman here, it is a 4. Remember I was talking before about hasty, regular, and prepared. That's what these 3 lines are. The black numbers here are its effectiveness rating, and then the columns are the different types that can be. So the first column is going to be the hasty. Since this is a regular attack, we would be looking here in this white column. All we do is cross-reference the effectiveness rating with whatever values in there. So we got a 2, all right? Regular attack, not prepared. Prepared would have got us the same, unfortunately. Sometimes hasty can get you a better one, but it's not often. These chits are random, and this is where you're going to get a lot of your randomness for the battles of this game. So what we would do is multiply this. 2 times 2 equals 4. For our Sherman over here, his effectiveness rating is a 4. He also got a 2. And for his defensive columns, all right, it's going to be disrupted, not disrupted, and improved defense. So if you're improved defense, you get the farthest right column, the best column. If you're undisrupted, you get that middle column. And if you are disrupted, you're going to get that first, that red column. He also got a 2. 2 times 5 is 10. So it's 10 versus 4. Did not work out good for our Stuggy here. So in addition to these 2 chits that are drawn, there are also other combat die roll modifiers that can come into play. Not stuff that affects your combat value, your strength, but the combat die roll modifiers, what you're going to use on that results table. All right, so that's going to be either your terrain, combat support. Combat support is if you have adjacent units providing a positive die roll modifier. HQ support, and the tank points I talked about previously. All right, so the die roll modifiers on this can get big. So the HQ for each of these 2 units is this. This one has a supply of 2 or combat rating of 2. This one's got a 4, so they can both apply it. They're both within range of their HQs in supply and all that good stuff. When it comes to the tank value, you are going to compare those 2 numbers. So for our defender, we've got a 6. For our attacker, we got a 6. That would cancel out. Neither side's going to get a die roll modifier from that. However, if it is either positive or negative, it will apply to whichever side has the better value, right? So if the Germans had a 10 instead of a 6, they would get a +4 from their tank. So if it was that tank instead, they would get a +4 for having a higher tank value. One of the things, though, is when it comes into combat, if you do have tank points being used, you can't choose not to use them. If they're there, you got to use them. Then some of the first step losses do have to be applied to those tanks. So ultimately, what we're looking at here is a 10 or attack of a 4 to 10, which, what is that going to be? A 2 to 5 on the chart. And you're always round down on the combat results table with an ultimate die roll modifier of a -2, since we have better support for the defenders. So when we look on our little chart here, we're in the clear hex. Actually, slide that up. It's a 1 to 2 when we ultimately round it down, because we do end up getting we were 2 to 5, round it down, 1 to 2.5, and you reduce the remainder, so we've got a 1 to 2 rating. And then you just roll here and apply whatever modifier. For us, we got a -2, so that ultimately becomes a 7. 7 would be 2 hits to the attacker and 1 hit to the defender. Similar to other games of its nature, the hits, the first ones have to be applied as step losses, which again, we're going to use these counters to represent those step losses. And then the remaining hits can be resolved as a combination of retreats, forced and voluntary retreats, and then the remainder have to be step losses or combat strength losses in this case. All right, so I really was breezing through quickly on how combat is played in this game. There's a lot going on with it, but I will tell you straight out that this rule book is not a hard read, but it is a easy read. For a game of this complexity and depth, I was very pleasantly surprised by how easy the rule book was able to be understood. Everything that they were trying to get across just made sense. I stumbled a few points when I was reading the rules, went back and just double checked it, and it was misinterpreting a word here or there. Really, for the depth of gameplay that they have going on here, because again, it's a lot deeper than I was originally anticipating. There's a huge back and forth going on between the formations activating, and you really have a lot of choice involved with that on who you're activating and how long you're going to keep activating those units over and over and over again, because you're going to get that battle fatigue and you're not going to get a whole lot of that back. Plus, you start incurring those losses, you're not going to just be able to recoup them easily, right? You've got to maintain your force as much as possible. It's going to be hard for the Americans pushing through such a defensive line here. But even with the depth of the formation activation, the depth of combat, I know it seems a little complex the way that I was explaining it with these combat chits that you're going to be drawing for each side. But again, you're just drawing one for each side, and the columns are easy to understand once you've just read the rules. There's just 3 different levels, right? Defensive, it's disrupted, not disrupted, improved. And then there's 3 types of attack: hasty, regular, and prepared. It's really easy to understand. You just look at what number rating you have, cross-reference it, and you're done. You're done. It's not as complex as it seems on camera. I know it seems like a lot, but the rule book is actually well written, and it is easy to understand, and it's not that long. We're talking about roughly 30 pages. Roughly 30 pages. And a deep, rich game that can give you that World of War 85 feel in 30 pages. In 30 pages. I mean, just more power to them. All right, I know I got long-winded. I've yapped a lot. I've covered a massive amount of information. Let's go back. We'll do some final thoughts on the game and tell you what's going on. All right, so here we are for some final thoughts on Aachen, 1944. The double A throws me. I can't tell if I'm saying it right or wrong. But as you can see, there's a lot of things going on with this game, especially with that formation system. Now, I didn't get to cover every single little aspect. There was so much that I was trying to cover. I had to cut out a little bit here, a little bit there, just to try to fit it into a compressed video. But there's just so much going on, especially with that activation system, and I like that because board games can get a little samey, right? You've got the I go, you go. I'm going to take a turn. I'm going to activate all my stuff. Then you're going to take a turn. You're going to activate all your stuff. And here they've actually got it set up so you can feel the exhaustion, right? The wear and tear that starts to come onto the troops if you keep pushing them farther and farther and farther and farther. Yes, starting off, that unit might be high up on that initiative track. They might be 7. That's top level. Good chance for them to activate, have a lot of action points, and be able to conduct many actions. But as you activate them, again and again and again, they quickly start dropping down that track, especially if they run out of supply. Then they just drop on that initiative track. But being low on it means that they have to have better and better rolls to be able to get anywhere near a decent amount of action points to be able to use on their turn. So starting off, when you first have the formation, you might be able to move a handful of units, get off a few hasty attacks, maybe a prepared attack, something along those lines. But then, later on in the ops phase, you might only be able to move one unit, maybe squeak out just a quick hasty attack, but you're not getting any of those extra modifiers, those bonus points that you get from having your HQ and supply, your tank points available. So of course you want to have those combined arms. Some of those things start wearing off as you've worn down the units through too many activations. All your formations are going to have that build up over time, and that's where the end of the turn effectively is going to come from. Both sides will eventually be so worn down that they will pass, and you'll go into the next admin phase and then ops phase, of course. And I like how it's asymmetric for the factions on how many points that they're getting back. With the Americans, you're getting 5 or you're getting 2, and that's the bump up on the track, right? So if they can go up to 7, then they'll get 5 points. If they can go up to 4, then they're only going to get 2 points up on that. And you're not going to be able to get a whole lot done if you burn a formation down completely every single turn. They're only going to get that amount, at least for the Americans. With the Germans, it's a little bit different in the fact that the interdiction points come into play. Their bump up the track is going to be variable depending on what the interdiction level is. It's similar to the Americans and the way that it's going to operate, and the fact that the lower you are on that track, the more worn down the formation is, the less distance is going to be able to go back up, obviously. So you're going to have those less activations for the next turn. It might behoove you to conserve for a turn, do just 1 or 2 activations. That way you can get that full bump all the way up for all your formations on the next turn, and then you can go blitz out and just hit as hard as you can. One soft turn to hit them hard on the next turn. It gives you the ability to kind of control your flow of combat. How many actions, how much you're going to have going on. And if you see your opponent just pushing everything, then it might behoove you to, ease back, because he's going to be weaker on the next turn. So if you're able to conserve and hold out, then you can push real hard on the next turn when he is at his weakest, giving you that little bit of advantage, maybe able to push through those dragon's teeth, form a hole in his line, be able to push through. Also, quickly, when it comes to the victory points, I love the fact that is different. It's always going to be variable. There's the handful of chits that you're going to draw, and it's either going to be whatever the target is or a dummy chit, but there's 8 of them for the 8 turns total, and your opponent's not going to know. Now, there's a small chance they might be able to turn over one of those chits to figure out what you've got going on, at least what the Germans know the Americans are up to. But the odds of them having that happen are relatively low, and it's random, right? They only get to pick one chit to see. And if they pick one of the dummies, which the majority are dummies, then they're still not going to know what the Americans are up to. Thing is there's multiple victory point hexes across the map, which is going to give this game some replayability. The Americans might go for Aachen one time, they might go for a different town another time, might be the objective to push for the Ruhr River, which is all the way across that damn map. That's going to be really hard, but it keeps the Germans on their toes, because they can't really just focus their defense. They can't just focus for Aachen or just focus for the Ruhr, because if they put all their eggs in one basket and it's the wrong basket, then it's going to allow the allies to quickly flank them and achieve a victory. And then when it comes to the battle system itself, I like the fact that that's different, and that little bookmark player aid that they put in there just makes that combat results table that much easier to understand. You can just slide it across. Makes it so much easier to see, because sometimes you do, dragging your finger across, you read the wrong number. It can happen to all of us. Having that in there, that's just ease of play for the player. It's a nice thing that the publishers made, and it shows they're thinking of the player and their ability to play the game without making goofy little mistakes, right? It's not messing up the rules, it's just reading the wrong line, But those combat chits are going to be randomly drawn for each side during each attack. So it gives that variability that you need for combat. You're not going to always have this modifier or that modifier. You can only do your best to ensure that you potentially get the best modifier. So if you're doing a prepared attack, spending the 3 action points for it, and you've got combined arms, so you've got tanks, you've got infantry, you've got those tank points that you need, you're in range, you're in command of your HQ supplied, so you've got everything going for you for that attack, then you stand the best chance of getting that good modifier on the chit. But stuff can still happen. Things can go wrong, and you might end up with a low modifier on it even though you did everything. And then vice versa. Sometimes you might have to make that Hail Mary attack, trying to push them back and plug the hole in the line. You've only got that 1 action point left, and you've got to put everything into this. Can this one beaten down infantry battalion hold out? Can they push them back just that one time? And then you draw the chit and you get that 3 times modifier. And you're like, oh, yes, we were finally able to do it. That's what I'm talking about. There is that randomness, that replayability. The odds are in your favor if you make the right choices, but it does account for stuff happening, right? The things can go wrong or they can go right. I will say, though, that's one of the little drawbacks to the game, and that comes into the fact that combat is cumbersome. It's not hard. I will give it to them. The rule book is written in such a way that it is relatively easy to understand. You might have to go back, read a couple of paragraphs once, twice, make sure you get it in your head right. You didn't misread a word in there somewhere. But there's still a lot going on with this. It's bulky, it's cumbersome. And that's going to slow you down. There's only 8 turns in the game, but it's going to take you a while to play through all those 8 turns, because for every single attack you're going to have to do that check for supply. You're going to have to see what modifiers you've got going on. You're going to have to compute for your HQ support points. You're going to have to check for tank points. Then you're going to have to check for anti-tank points. And then you're going to have to figure out what that modifier is, right? Then if you have any supporting units around, if they are applicable to be able to submit their modifier, their support, and then what level of support, because if it's regular, it's only +1. If it's prepared, it's +2. And then pulling the chit, figuring out where you are on that chit. It's 9 different numbers on there. You have to figure out which one applies to you. It's deep combat, which I like, but because of that, it will slow the game down. You're not going to just, okay, I'm attacking here, the ratio's this, roll the die, and done. There's a little bit of math going on there, and you're going to have to do that for every single attack that's going to take place. I'm good with that because I like when they try something different. I like when the combat is not just basic. It's not beer and pretzels. If there's a little something else extra going on there. And having that little something else extra, you're going to have to spend that extra time for it. And ultimately, the components, like I said when I was talking about it in the video, components are great. Components are good. No fault with them. They have a little bit thinner counters, but they're not bad. Not bad at all. They're thicker than the white core, and for some reason, they got that little tile feeling to them. I like it. They're pre-rounded, so no clipping. Good there. All player aids are mounted, so you don't have to worry about creasing anything. And the board is well mounted as well. I didn't feel like I was going to tear it when I'm folding it out. Like, some mounted boards, they're cut a little too deep, and you feel like you're having to be real careful when you fold it out. This, you're not going to have that problem. Oh, and I need to make sure I don't forget to mention the strength point chits as well. That's another thing. It's going to take you a little extra times, more counters, a little dents on the board. But I like the fact that it's not just a simple, all right, it's 3-step counter. It's either full strength, it's half strength, or it's dead. You know, so many games go with that. This, whatever their combat strength is what they are, right? So, like I was showing you, some of those infantry units, they have a lot more strength points available, so they can take multiple hits before they're destroyed, and they can be reinforced throughout the game. But some of those tank units, they've only got a combat strength of 1, right? And you're thinking, wow, that's really weak. But then you realize you're not including that tank for its combat strength. You're including that tank for its tank point strength. That's where you're really banking on it. And you're getting that just huge swing and a modifier in your favor. If it's something like 10 tank points, that's huge. If the opponent doesn't have any tank points or doesn't have enough anti-tank points, then you're getting that just severe swing modifier going in your direction that can really just change how the combat's going to play out. I like that. It is going to make it unwieldy, right? The combat strength points counters, there's plenty of them, enough for all the different units, for all the different strength points, so you're not going to ever run out. But it is just one other little thing you got to keep track of. Ultimately, Crossing the Line gets a good score from me. If I had to give this one a 1 to 10, I would probably go with 7.5, 8. I think it's a good game. It's not perfect, but it is a good game. If you're interested in the field, the battle, it's definitely worth checking out. I would say fans of games like World at War 85 will find something that they like here. Or more aptly, if you're into the Nations at War series, which was the kind of like a World War II version of World War 85, that had a chip pull mechanic with it. But just the way the formations are activated and how you have control over how many activations you're going to have really lends itself to people who enjoy that type of gameplay. If you're into I go, you go, and you just want the streamline, this probably isn't the game for you. But if you're not, you want something that you got to put a little thought into and think about, is it worth that one more activation? Should I make this one more push, or should I save it for the next turn? Then yeah, Crossing the Line, definitely worth checking out. But all right, that's going to be it for me. I hope you guys enjoy this one. I hope Volka can forgive me for missing it previously. They won't hold it against me. My sincere apologies on that one. I should not have missed it, but I hope this does make up for it. All right, you guys take care. I'll catch you in the next one.